Howdy folks, Spencer here, and today I'm going to be going through and reviewing the World Razer Temporal Ops Juggernaut. As always, chapters will be listed down below for those of you that want to skip ahead to discussion about any specific part of the ship. And I'd also like to say thanks to Jaron, or First to Die, for providing this ship for me to review. And the first thing that I want to talk about is the origin of the World Razer. This ship originates from the Confederacy timeline, which was shown throughout Season 2 of Star Trek Picard, and we specifically saw this ship on a painting on the wall of Picard's study in the Confederation timeline in Episode 2 of that season. We didn't actually see the ship in combat, we never saw it in space. The only place we saw it was this painting on the wall of his study. However, given what we saw from the rest of the Confederation in that season, the Confederation had built ships that had a massive amount of firepower, and it really leans towards there being some high expectations for this ship, because the Picard in the Confederation timeline that flew this ship was able to go in and dominate the Borg to the point that they had the Borg Queen locked up in the basement of their headquarters. So in this painting, Picard is going in and devastating and destroying a Borg cube. Now, you compare that to what the Galaxy class did in the Prime timeline, and clearly this ship has a lot more firepower potential than what we're used to seeing a Galaxy class offer. And next up, let's talk about availability. This is unfortunately a lockbox ship, and it launched as part of the Safe Galaxy lockbox, which, as of me recording this video, is now live on all platforms. The drop rate to win this ship is the exact same as it would be for any other ship from any other lockbox. If you're not familiar with the drop rates or the pity point system, I have a video that I'll leave linked down in the description below that explains all of that, and you can see just how atrocious the gambling system is within this game. But if you need more evidence that it's bad, then I would refer you over to Martin's videos, where he opened like $650 worth of the Safe Galaxy lockboxes before he got a World Razer. So the drop rate is absolutely atrocious, but thankfully, if you don't want to gamble for it, you can also acquire it via the player exchange. Alternatively, if you are very patient, this ship will be added to the Infinity Lockbox at some point in the future, probably early 2024, and that will increase availability. And alternatively, if you do want to get this ship for free, it will be available as an option from Event Campaign 6, which will start up in 2024, and then all following event campaigns should also have it available as an option. So if you want to get it for free, that is a route you can go, but you're going to be waiting a while because that's still at least a year out as of me recording this. And now let's talk about customization. So one of the big things with the World Razer is that people do not like how it looks visually. Thankfully, it is fully customizable with all other Galaxy class skins, so you can make it look like a normal Galaxy class if you really dislike how the World Razer looks at its stock form. There are no new materials, windows, or interiors unlocked from the World Razer, and for the two pieces that do have the Confederation logo on them, the hull and nacelles, there are alternative options that you can select that will have the standard Federation logo. So let me go in game here and show this. So a big thing with the World Razer stock appearance is the deflector is moved up to under the saucer, and the saucer itself is just really funky shaped compared to the normal Galaxy class ships. So thankfully you can go in, and if you really don't like how how a part of this looks, you can go in and make it look like any other Galaxy class ship, so long as you have that skin unlocked. So if you want to make it look like the normal Galaxy, you can go through and do that. You can fully kit bash this, do whatever you want with it, just make it look like a normal Galaxy. It's entirely up to you. Now, as I mentioned, for these pieces that do have the Confederation logo on them, you'll see that they're labeled as -Confed. There is another option in the customization settings here to change that over to a version that just has the normal Fed logo. So that is how it changes the hull And for the nacelles, same thing. You can see that there's a version here that just has the Federation logo, and then that separate version that has the Confederation one. So it's up to you what you want to do there. But this ship has a lot of customization options, given that it can access all of the other Galaxy class pieces. So if you really do not like how the World Razer looks, then don't worry, because you can make it look like whatever Galaxy class ship you want that is from the traditional Galaxy family. You cannot kit bash this with any of the Galaxy Dreadnoughts, so the ones that have the 3 nacelles, those are technically a different family of ships within the game. And on the topic of compatibility with the older Galaxy class ships, with regards to the consoles off of the normal Galaxy class ships will all work perfectly fine on the World Razer, including the saucer separation console. And for the Galaxy X Dreadnought side of things, the cloak console does work on this ship. However, the console off of the Yamato, the supplemental subsystems console, does not currently work on the World Razer. So I have all of these in game here, and I'll slot all of them that it will let me. So antimatter spread, I can slot that perfectly fine. Saucer separation goes on here fine. The molecular cohesion nullifier, I can slot that. The cloak console, like I said, I can slot that. But when it comes to the supplemental subsystems console, I cannot actually use that. And if you look at the details, it specifically says that it can only be equipped on Starfleet Dreadnought cruisers, which this does not qualify for. And now let's head over to the core stats of this ship. So this has a 5-3 weapon setup with 3 engineering consoles, 3 science, and 5 tactical. Once you upgrade it to T6X like I have, then you will also get that universal console. For the stats here, we have a hull modifier of 1.45, shield mod of 1.15, base turn rate of 7, impulse modifier of 0.16, inertia of 35, so it's a little bit sluggish. For the power bonus here, we have plus 10 weapon power, plus 5 engine, and plus 5 aux. This ship can equip dual cannons, and for the mastery package, it has the Juggernaut configuration, which is 2.5% crit chance, 15 severity, some hull regen, and plus 10% Cat 1 damage for energy weapons and torpedoes. And another important thing to note about this ship is that it is a Juggernaut. And one of the unique features of these Juggernaut ships is that they have an integrated Juggernaut array. Now, these Juggernaut arrays differ from a typical lance that you would see in a ship. A lance would just fire a beam of energy in front of the ship, and these Juggernaut arrays shoot a massive, like, cannon bolt directly in front of the ship that will travel up to 10 kilometers away and deal damage to anything that is in its path. So if you time a Juggernaut array right, then you can get a massive amount of damage out of it. Now, with the World Razer, the version of the Juggernaut array that we have here is going to deal phaser damage, and what that means is that any phaser damage buffs that you have on your ship are actually going to boost the Juggernaut array. So if you're using the World Razer, you would probably want to use a phaser-based build with it to maximize the Juggernaut array, so that when you do hit it, you are getting as much damage out of it as possible. Now, this Juggernaut array does have a 2-minute cooldown, so you cannot spam bar it. If you do, you are going to get basically 0 damage out of it. You want to make sure to time this when you have as many enemies in front of you as possible. And if you do that, then you can get a massive amount of damage out of this, easily 10 to 20 times more than what you would get out of most of the lances that are integrated into other ships. Now, I do have some footage of this Juggernaut array in action, and you're going to see that it's a big ball of energy that just launches right out the front of my ship when I activate it, and it just keeps going. So it's a very big ball of energy, as you see there. It's dealt quite a bit of damage, and it just keeps going. And then once it gets like 10 kilometers away, it disappears. So timing it right and positioning your ship to be directly facing at the enemies when you activate it is crucial if you want to maximize the DPS that this Juggernaut Array can do. And now let's take a look at the bridge officer setup of this ship. So we have a commander tack with Temporal Operative, a lieutenant commander engineer with command, lieutenant commander universal, lieutenant universal, and an ensign science. So before I get into the specializations, I do want to mention that these two universal seats really give you a lot of flexibility with this ship. You can make it super tack heavy. You can make it really psi heavy. You can make it a bit tankier with another engineer. It really is quite a bit of flexibility for this ship, and it gives you many, many different ways that you can build this ship out. Now, for the temporal operative seating, there's a few different things that this does allow for. With all the psi seating on the ship, you could set this up as a do psi boat or a torp psi boat. You'd have plenty of temporal abilities to use to get a bunch of SIA procs on the build. You would have enough room to put, as many psi abilities on here as you want. Of course, you're not going to have a secondary deflector, but that is just an option that you would have with the ship. For more traditional do or torp based builds, the temporal operative seating is going to give you access to some very low cooldown unconventional systems procs. So Heisenberg amplifier, very low cooldown. Chronometric inversion field, also really good for uncon. And for reference, if you're not familiar with what uncon is, uncon or unconventional systems is a personal space trait that is from lockboxes, but you can also acquire it for about 30 mil on the exchange. And every time you hit a control bridge officer ability, it will reduce the cooldown on your universal consoles by 7%. So having a ton of really low cooldown abilities on your build that proc unconventional systems means that you're going to have more uptime on all of your universal consoles. And of course, with temporal, we also get access to recursive shearing. So if you like to play elite level content and you want to have that really potent single target ability, then recursive shearing is going to be something very much worth picking up on this ship. And recursive shearing, for those of you not familiar with it, is a mark on target ability that once you mark it on a target, it will take all of the damage that you and your allies do to the target each second and give you an additional 30% of that amount as physical damage to the target the following second. So if your team does 10 million damage to a target in 1 second, you are going to get an additional 3 million damage dealt to the target the following second. So recursive shearing is extremely powerful against really large targets in an environment where they live long enough. So if you're playing normal or advanced content, things will probably die before you can really get too much out of this ability. But if you're playing elite content, then recursive is going to be extremely potent. And on the command side of things, you have access to a couple of the command abilities that are pretty good. Most notably, you have Concentrate Firepower 3, which is the core part of any modern torpedo build. Concentrate Firepower is a mark on target ability, and with rank 3 of it, every 2 seconds, you or another ally that has a torpedo will get the proc from it, which will give you a high yield 1 and reset all of your torpedo cooldowns. So extremely important for any modern torp build, and this combined with that recursive shearing is going to be devastating against really big targets in harder content that live long enough for your abilities to fully get their maximum uptime. In lower difficulty stuff, you may not get much out of CF or recursive, but in elite, they are going to be a devastating combo. Now, you could also run Call Emergency Artillery 1 if you're not doing torps, and if you wanted to use this as a bit of a tank, you could also go in and run Suppression Barrage 1. It's not the best, but that would be an option if you wanted to try and tank with this ship. Now, there are a few different ways to build this ship, as I said, and I have a couple of examples up on the screen now. And, as you've probably figured out with what I've been saying so far, this ship if you're really wanting to take advantage of the temporal and command abilities it has, is really going to excel in environments where you are going against enemies that live long enough for you to get full uptime out of abilities like recursive and CF. So here are some example bridge officer layouts if you want to pause and take a look at them. At the left is a hybrid cannon, scatter volley, and torpedo setup, and this is actually what I used when trying the ship out a month or so back. Then we have a hybrid beam overload and torpedo setup, and you could do a torp spread if you wanted. And then over at the right, we have a pure torpedo build. Now, I do have an infected run to show you using the layout from the left there. Let me get that up on the screen for you now. This is a 1.6 mil run with the hybrid cannon, scatter volley, and torp setup. So let me skip ahead to where it starts. And of course, this was a supported run. I was playing with McStud, Nick, Megla, Rob, and Cables. So you can see right off the start here, I actually forgot to hit my fire weapons button right away. So it was a little bit slower, but it was still a really good opening for cannons. The left side went well, and you can see with me having the CF and recursive on, hitting those against these really big targets is netting a very nice boost in damage. And if I was trying to do this in advanced, like I've been saying, I wouldn't really be able to get much out of those abilities. So I'm trying to hit CF and recursive on these bigger targets, trying to just keep everything up in front of me because I'm using cannon scatter volley, and I also have a torpedo on that needs the targets to be right in front of me. And I think right here, I'm about to use the Juggernaut Array. It's going to be hard to see because you guys know how the visual spam in this game is. It's ridiculous. Once I saw all the spheres getting dragged up in front of me, that's when I hit the Juggernaut Array, and it did quite a bit of damage. And Gateway's about dead here. Again, this was a supported run, so like my entire team was dedicated tank and then a bunch of dedicated support builds. So not realistic for what you would experience in like a channel run. And the end here is where the cannon scatter volley part of the build really struggles the most because against a single target, cannon scatter volley isn't going to be great, but that's where the recursive and the torp really come into play to help boost the damage up there. So 1.6 mil in the end, and that was cannon scatter volley with one torp on. So if you want to see that build in a bit more detail, it is posted up to my Discord. If you want to see the specifics there, grab the STO role there and then go to Spencer's builds, and that build is posted in that channel as the World Razer CSV Torp Hybrid build. And you can see it was 4 dual heavy cannons and then the enhanced bomb molecular torp. So the ship performs well, a bit sluggish, but I think if you have the right speed boost items on, you can still get the ship to perform quite well. And now let's take a look at some of the comparable ships out there. So within the Galaxy class itself, there is the Terran Cygnus that also has a Temporal plus command setup. However, it's got a Commander Engineer with its Temporal, and it only has a Lieutenant command seat. So it can't do the same recursive plus CF combo that the World Razer can do. And as we go through the list here, we see that there are 2 other ships in the game that have a Commander TAC with Temporal Operative and a command seat, those being the Husnock and the Sphere Builder Denuis Dreadnought Carrier. However, both of those only get a Lieutenant command seat, which runs into the same limitation that the Cygnus has, where they can't run Concentrate Firepower rank 3. So rank 2 of Concentrate Firepower is much less desirable, and it generally is accepted within the Torp community that it's either you run Concentrate Firepower rank 3, or you just get a ship that can run it. So if it doesn't have rank 3, then it doesn't really have much value. Now, if we filter or change the filters a little bit to explicitly only show Commander Temporal plus Lieutenant Commander Command, one of the things that I thought was really interesting here is that the majority of the ships that match that spec setup are promo. So there is one ship here that is a legendary, and that is the legendary Glenn. That's part of the 10th bundle. But for the other, all of the other ships outside the World Razer and the Glenn that have this Commander Temporal plus Lieutenant Commander Command setup, they're all promo. And that's because this has been seen as like a premium spec combo to have on a ship for a very long time. So it's interesting to me that they decided to make the World Razer a lockbox ship rather than promo, because the way it's set up really does match what a promo ship would offer. In fact, in some ways, this World Razer is beating out some of the promo offerings here. Now, I want to go through and compare the ship a bit closer now to some of the ships that I think people are really going to be comparing it to. And that is the Cygnus and also the Kirk. So the Terran Cygnus is a C-Store ship. That's also a Galaxy-class ship. That was released in the 12th anniversary bundle. And the Kirk is a promo ship, which dropped late 2021, I believe. So if we look through these, you can see the big difference here is that the World Razer's got a Commander TAC. The Cygnus and Kirk both have a Commander Engineer with their Temporal Operative. And then, as I already mentioned before, the Cygnus only gets a Lieutenant command, whereas the other two here do actually get that full Lieutenant Commander command, which makes them much more viable from a torpedo point of view. Now, comparing the Kirk to the World Razer, the big thing here is the amount of universal seatings. You see here the World Razer gets a Lieutenant Commander Universal plus a Lieutenant Universal, whereas both of these other ships here, the Cygnus and the Kirk, only get that Lieutenant Commander Universal. So the World Razer is leaps better when it comes to the build options that you're going to have available on it, as I was talking about before. And I think when you look at these stats side by side, the World Razer, is winning in pretty much all categories. The only place that the Kirk really is better than the World Razer is that it has a little bit more hull capacity and its maneuverability is a little bit better. But I think the World Razer can be maneuverable enough for elite content if you're running things like emergency powered engines, deuterium surplus, emergency con hologram, and competitive engines. So I don't think that's that big of a deal. And I think that the advantages that the World Razer has with its bridge officer seating, it's more tactical focused, just in general, make that ship stand out and win against the Kirk or the Cygnus here. And the Kirk does also have an innate 32nd century battle cloak. The World Razer does not have any innate battle cloak, but it does, of course, have that innate Juggernaut Array that I talked about before. So I think for most people, looking at this comparison, if I had to choose one of these ships to go with, I don't really think there's any way that I would be choosing anything other than the World Razer between these three ships here. And now let's take a look at the console, Light of Civilization. So this has passives on it for +5 current weapon subsystem power and +35% crit severity versus foes that are below 20% health. Now, when I see these buffs like this that give you a buff when the target is under 20% health, to me they're not really that valuable, because that is the point where the target's about dead at that point. It's you're not really going to get too much of a boost out of that. So I basically ignore these types of buffs, because once you have a target to 20% health, it's basically dead. So the passives are pretty mediocre, as I said here. Most targets, once they hit 20%, they're basically dead already. Now, the clicky on this console is Light of Civilization, and this will fire off a phaser beam, which you see at the bottom left here. And after a couple seconds, this will improve. It'll charge up and it'll start to do more damage, and it'll persist on the target for, I think it's like 15 seconds or something like that. And if you kill the target while the beam is up, then it will cause a different type of core breach called a Light of Civilization core breach, which will make the core breach from that target do more damage than usual. Now, I tried this thing out, and one of the first things I was curious about is it's a beam. It's like a lance thing coming out of your ship, basically, that just persists for that entire duration. Does it hit anything between you and the target? And the answer is no. I tried this out on the triple test map with a target directly between me and the target I had selected, and you could see that the beam literally went right through them and did no damage, which I think is a bit of missed opportunity there. I think this would have performed a little bit better had it been able to have damaged anything in that path. Now, the DPS performance from this console is terrible. I went in and I retested it again today on March 15th just to double check my numbers. I went and put it on my Terran Hydra, and I did an Argala Elite. Even in Elite difficulty, where targets live long enough for that beam to stay on target and do a ton of damage, it doesn't do much damage. In an Argala Elite, where it was active for a couple seconds, it did a total of 47,000 damage. That ended up being 461.6 DPS. That's really not much. The numbers that I have consistently seen from this console have been very poor. The passives on it aren't really that special to me. And then you look at the damage performance from it. The thing I said on stream when I first got the ship and tried this console out was that as soon as you get the ship, you should just throw the console away. And I think that's probably the best idea for it. It just, I'm running a full phaser build, and it's doing 47k damage. Meanwhile, my immolating phaser lance is up here doing 2.4 million damage. That's really not acceptable in the current state of the game. And if I'm having issues getting damage out of it in elite content, it's basically not going to do anything in normal or advanced content. And now let's take a look at the Starship Trait Cultural Conquest. While this trait is slotted, activating any weapon firing mode will net you a 25% Cat 1 all damage boost for 15 seconds. If your weapons hit a foe that has applied a debuff, like Attack Pattern Beta to you, or they've applied a dot to you, so damage over time would be something like a Plasma Fire, or they have applied a control to you, like a Tractor Beam or Gravity Well, then the damage bonus that you get from this trait is doubled up to 50% Cat 1, and you will remove one debuff that has been applied to you. In PvP, that debuff removal has a 1.5 second cooldown. Now, this trait initially didn't look that good, but one of the things that was realized quickly after this went live is that the trait actually stacks, and that changes the value of this trait quite significantly. So if you go in and you hit a beam, cannon, and torp firing mode at the same time, you can currently get 3 stacks of this trait. So that is 75% Cat 1, and then if you hit a foe that has applied a debuff to you, then that gets doubled to 150%. So that's quite substantial with just 3 stacks. Now, there's currently a bug with this trait where mine firing modes were not triggering it. This may be fixed in the future. I just reported it to QA on March 15th, 2023. So we'll see if it gets fixed in the next couple of weeks. But if they fix that, that would increase the value of this trait even more, as it would allow you to get 4 stacks of this damage boost. That means 100% Cat 1 or 200% Cat 1 if you are able to hit a foe that has applied a debuff or control to you. So that is actually quite substantial, and I have looked in game to verify that the damage boost does indeed stack. So I'm going to remove my Borgdoffs just to make sure they don't interfere again. There we go. So pay attention to my subspatial warheads here, and we're going to see that as I hit multiple firing modes, the damage on this will go up quite a bit. Here's Cannon Scatter Volley, and there's 1 stack of Cultural Conquest. Torpedo High Yield, 2 stacks, you see the damage is going up, and if I hit High Yield, or Beam Overload, there we go. So I am actually getting that damage boost from each stack there, and again, if they fix that with the mine firing modes, that's 4 stacks. So for those of you that are doing energy or like just standard weapon based builds, this may not be that significant. I do think that this trait has the potential to be meta on quite a few builds, but we're going to have to wait and see how it works out math wise. For reference, if you are able to get 200% Cat 1 out of this, if they fix the mine firing mode issue there, then that would be equivalent to like, what, 4 or 5 TAC consoles? Yeah, 5. So that'd be a fairly substantial Cat 1 damage boost there. I'm not saying that everyone needs to go out, run out and grab this ship for the trait, but there are certainly going to be builds that are going to be able to take advantage of this trait quite a bit. Especially those of you that are running builds that don't use weapons, like an EPG build. You know, you don't always have a ton of sources for everything that are going to give you a Cat 1 damage boost, so a boost like this could end up being quite substantial for some of the other non-weapon build types out there. And the last thing I want to mention with this trait is that ETM will only net 1 proc. So if you hit a Torp spread, you're not going to get a stack of the trait from Cannon Scatter Volley or Fire at Will. And I will show that to you quick. So let me slot ETM, Entwine Tactical Matrices off the Gagarin. When you hit Torp spread, it'll give you a Fire at Will 1 and Scatter Volley 1. So let's see how that interaction works. And I'm pretty sure I just slotted it, but it looks like it already dropped. And if I hit Torp spread here, okay, here we go. Does it give more than 1 stack? Nope. Just 1 stack. So ETM is not going to allow you to get more stacks of this trait. As for the Admiralty card, this has plus 30 engineering, plus 30 science, and plus 66 to tactical. The special ability is plus 8 engineering and science per attack ship slotted. So who do I think this ship is for, and should you go out and pick it up? Well, I think there's really 3 different types of players in the game that are going to want to get this ship. The first group is those of you that are just fans of the Galaxy class that want this ship for the Space Barbie aspect, or just want to have a tactical focused Galaxy class. The second group of players that are going to want the ship are DPS chasers that want an extremely capable DPS platform that is going to be quite versatile for a variety of builds in elite level content. And the third group of players that are going to want the ship are probably those of you that can maximize the boost from the Starship Trait, that have builds that would really benefit from the massive amount of Cat 1 damage that Starship Trait can provide. So if you fall into one of those 3 criteria, then I think that this ship is something that I can definitely recommend picking up via the exchange or via a future event campaign. A reminder, it will not be available in Event Campaign 5 running throughout 2023, but it will be an option in the 2024 event campaign. And if you're just someone that just wants a good DPS ship for normal or advanced content, the Hydra is really good. I'm still working on getting a review done for that ship, but the Hydra is an incredible ship, especially given that it's a $30 C-Store ship. If you're just wanting something that can just destroy the enemies in normal or advanced, that's a $30 ship that is going to probably do better than the World Razer would in that type of content, because of how fast, how maneuverable and all that Hydra is compared to the World Razer. In conclusion, is this ship really that good? Well, I believe that the World Razer is an extremely capable DPS platform for those that like to play elite difficulty content. The combo that we have on the ship with the Temporal Operative and the Command really leans towards the Recursive Shearing 3 plus Concentrate Firepower 3 playstyle. You don't have to do that with this ship, but that's really what that specialization combo leans in towards. And if you want to take advantage of that type of build to its maximum potential, you want to go against targets that can stay alive for 10 to 15 plus seconds at a time, which you're just not going to get in normal in the current state of the game. The ship is also a little bit sluggish, which will probably be a limiting factor to its performance in lower difficulty content. In Elite, you can typically sit still at each of the points of the map and stay there for a couple seconds before you need to move on. Whereas in normal or advanced, you need to be zipping around. And this ship isn't really going to be zooming around. You can get some speed boost on this running things like emergency powered engines with the emergency con hologram from the Phoenix store. The competitive rep engines always help with maneuverability, and of course, spamming some deuterium surplus devices can also help to try and compensate and make this thing a little bit more maneuverable. But at the end of the day, it's still a ship that has 7 turn rate, like 30 inertia. It's not going to move as fast as something like the Hydra. And as for the console performs quite poorly, and I was barely able to get it to stay on the targets in Elite long enough to really do much damage. So in normal or advanced, you're probably not going to get anything out of it. The Starship Trait, on the other hand, does have quite a bit of potential, especially when using multiple firing modes to get multiple stacks of the trait. And as I said before, I really do think that the Starship Trait has the potential to become a meta option for a variety of non-weapon based builds. Once again, I'd like to thank Jaron for providing this ship for me to review. If any of you have any questions or comments about the ship or any of the things I talked about in today's video, feel free to drop them down below. And a reminder, over on my Discord, I do have, under the STO section, a build posted for the ship that I used to get that 1.6 mil run in. So if you want to go and take a look at that build in a bit more detail, hop over to the Discord, grab the STO role, and head down to the Spencer's Builds category. That's going to be it for today. Thank you for watching, and see you guys next time.